Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our segment this morning on October the 7th. It's 2 years since the genocide, and today we continue speaking about 2 years of Israel's global decline. And the specific angle that I want to look at this morning is how the charge of genocide, how the label of genocide has stuck and become mainstream when applied to Israel over the past 2 years. And this is highly significant. If we were to look at mainstream Western organizations and Western institutions over the past 2 years and their association of the State of Israel with genocide, we would find most recently the UN Commission of Inquiry saying that Israel's conduct fulfills four of the five acts described in the Genocide Convention. So clearly labeling it a genocide. You have the ICJ rulings that obviously it's an ongoing case, but ruled that there's a plausible case to hear. You had more recently 800 genocide and Holocaust scholars warning that Israel's actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of a genocide. Similarly, the International Association of Genocide Scholars saying that Israel's conduct bears the hallmarks of genocidal intent. And Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, all of them agreeing to this particular definition genocide. And if we were to go back, we would see that genocide is something that is enshrined in this Western order since 1948, and this term first arose in 1944, trying to capture the distinctive moral atrocity where there is an intent to systematically destroy a particular group. And then it was, as I mentioned, enshrined in the Genocide Convention, which defined genocide as this act which involve or which is committed with the intent to destroy in whole or part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. And like all of these terms and all the fluff that goes with a lot of international deliberations and the so-called international community and international institutions, sometimes there's a lot of legal hoops to get through. They set the bar so high. What is included, what is not included, and in the process, sometimes all of these kind of definitions and legal bars miss the point that the crux is to be able to save human lives, whether it is one life or whether it is many lives. But if we note how this particular charge has now become mainstream over the past 2 years, we have to realize that war crimes against the Palestinians did not start on October the 7th. And if anybody has been an honest observer, this point has been made so many times, that if anyone was an honest observer over the past 2 years, they would easily agree that Israel has been committing massive crimes for many, many, many years. But these crimes were always put in the media and were always presented by Israel as isolated incidents. It's a cycle of violence. And they always looked at what is occurring in Palestine piecemeal. This happened today. This happened in 1967. This happened in 1948. And there wasn't a way of gelling all of these disparate pieces together. And therefore, when a person uses a term like genocide, it brings all of these crimes together and forces everybody to look at the overall Israeli policy in a holistic way, not piecemeal, not one crime here, not one crime there, not a reaction, but it forces everybody to stop being in isolation and look at this particular crime in totality. And one of the genius, perhaps, of those who really pressed this forward and really sought to stick the genocide charge on Israel is perhaps from a marketing point of view. And let's be clear, this is not about marketing, it's not about propaganda. It is obviously about a crime that's defined in international law, so-called international law, and holding Israel to account according to those particular standards. But from a narrative point of view, when Israel is now charged for genocide, even if the International Criminal Court has not called for an immediate ceasefire, and it did not say that what Israel is doing, that's the ICJ at least, uh, immediately amounts to genocide, but it called this particular case plausible. So, what does this do for the narrative? That even if Israel avoided the harshest possible decree, it now walks amongst the world's nations with the label of genocide attached to it. And as even Zionists have admitted, that bell cannot be unrung. That thought cannot be unthunk. They have that label attached to them, regardless of whether a court has pronounced it or not. They are now walking around with that particular label all across the international community. It leaves a matter, this kind of language, it leaves a mark no matter what. Even if Israel is going to spend so much to be able to dial this particular accusation down, everybody out there is going to consider it reasonable to say that even if they may not agree with the final audit of this particular word, they do feel that there is a case for Israel to answer. So it's a most brilliant rhetorical strategy. And you'd find that people in the aftermath of the Israeli assaults in the wake of the resistance operation of October the 7th, we started seeing all of these atrocities on our phones. And people needed one way to be able to express or define their outrage of what they are seeing. And instead of describing this in 10 million different ways, when this word genocide became mainstreamed, then it was a uniform way for people all over the world to be able to describe it, and now it has become mainstream. How do we recognize this to be a moment of turning of the tables? Because many people would say, what's the use of calling it something? What's the use of taking this entire matter to a court? And seemingly, it is not, producing an outcome on the ground. Let us not be myopic again, as I mentioned yesterday, and just look at the failure of the court and the failure of the UN and the failure of international institutions, criticisms that are all in place. But let us look at the wider impact that the genocide accusation has had on Israel. So even if a final ruling has not come from the ICJ, and we don't have the highest of expectations of the ICJ, the fact that the judges recognize plausible rights under the convention is significant. It shifts this discourse on what Israel is doing from an allegation to something that even these judges, many from Western countries, said could merit intervention. And that's the key here, that this provides the basis for further legal claims, advocacy, and pressure. And there is great merit as well to be able to give a name to something. So when people are in peril and you give a name, it now raises the degree of concern around the world. It raises the degree of attention around the world to avoid genocide, blindness. This is all significant because we look at where we were and where we are right now. The Israeli propagandists controlled the language before, and it was always Palestinian terrorism. it was always Israelis being killed and Palestinians just dying. It was always omitting the context in which Palestinians committed or Palestinians embarked on the act of resistance. But what we have seen now is the accusation of genocide shifts the moral framing, and it legitimizes the resistance. If there is a genocide, how can a person not resist that genocide? And it counters the suggestion that the Israelis always tried to create, that the Palestinians were illegitimate, their cause was illegitimate, they are the only ones doing wrong. And now it shifts that ball, very significantly into the Israeli court. What we also find here is through the ICJ process. I was quite surprised watching the ICJ process, and you would find words, the genocidal language of Israelis being broadcast openly in an international court. They actually used clips from the likes of alternative sources such as Middle East Eye. So this has given a platform for alternative media to be able to become widespread around the world. Alternative concepts that we've always spoken about in our own echo chambers have now reached such a wide audience, and it was actually institutions such as the United Nations inadvertently that gave a platform to this. And when we now see that it's not only Muslims and it's not only a fringe group of human rights activists that are using this particular language, but NGOs, media, government, it helps normalize scrutiny of Israelis' actions. It widens what is acceptable to say in public. And this is amplified by grassroots, networks, social media. And we've seen now very recently in polls how even Jews, young Jews in the United States of America, so many, such a large percentage of them, very confidently say what Israel is committing in Gaza is genocide. This can have a wider impact legally. So even if this court doesn't decide in this particular way, other courts, lower courts, will look at what Israel is doing and what Israelis are doing through the lens of genocide. It forces states, global states, to not just speak words, but reinforce their obligations under so-called international law. And they will now have to clearly take sides and justify why they are taking a particular side. And lastly, the significance of the genocide label being stuck on Israel is Israel for years was always giving the idea that it had a moral legitimacy because it was supposedly, the Israeli state, it claimed, was the victim of the Holocaust, victim of terrorism, etc. But this particular charge that has stuck over the past 2 years has shifted Israel from being a perpetual victim to now being seen as a perpetrator and the terrorist, the perpetrator all over the world. So this label has been very important in shifting attention and demanding accountability and altering moral perceptions. We are in no illusions that there are still some who don't use this term. We are in no illusions that the ICJ is a very weak body in terms of its enforcement, and we don't have great hope in that. But we're talking about the broader narrative that this has succeeded in creating. What is very important, as I say in conclusion, is that genocide is not a light word. And we also need to be aware that we shouldn't normalize the term genocide to such an extent that it becomes, just another term. Genocide is an imminent wipeout, an imminent extermination of a people. And therefore, while we celebrate this term becoming mainstream, let us not trivialize the impact of what is required to respond to a genocide. Till we speak again tomorrow on 2 years of Israel's global decline. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh from myself, Ibrahim Musa.